Blessings upon you today. Welcome to our Cornerstone Word for the week. I'm Pastor Augustus T. Curry. As always, it's a joy, honor, and delight to share with you in the study of the Word. I'm super excited about our new series that we are beginning today and the new unit within the series that we are starting. The series is dealing with worship and the importance of worship, how we worship. Most theologians, I believe, would suggest to us that our worship begins with our appreciation and acknowledgement of who God is and what he means to us. Many like to use the verse Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 22, where it says, "So you will be my people and I will be your God." That's known as God's covenant with us, his people, his believers. It gives notice of his enduring promise of two things, relationship and presence. You will be my people, I will be your God. Relationship and presence, two wonderful things that ought to inspire anyone to give God praise and glory through our worship. Our worship of something depends on what we feel it is worth to us. What we consider to be God's worthiness determines our worship of him. What you value, what you appraise, appreciate, leads to your affirmation, acknowledgement of that which you worship and value. And so when we think about all that the Lord has done, is doing, and is continuing to do for us, his people, collectively as a people, and then in our own individual lives, he certainly, you would have to come to the conclusion, is worthy of our worship. Again, it's ascribing, it celebrates, it gives glory to that which we value. Of course, our expressions of worship can change through cultures, through time, centuries, sometimes even seasons, our expression of worship. This series is going to look at some individuals in the Bible and how they express worship, whether it be through dance, songs, psalms, works. Again, we don't work because we are saved. We work because we don't work to be saved. We work because we are saved. Today we'll be looking at an expression of worship that deals with the ideal of building an altar. That's what Abraham does. And so we began with this unit within this series. We began by looking at Genesis chapter 13 and primarily verses 8 through 18. Genesis chapter 13, we'll begin with verse 1 to kind of give us the context of what we are looking at today. It is entitled, Abram Builds an Altar. Sometimes when you follow the curriculum of the International Sunday School Lesson and the National Baptist Convention Publishing Board curriculum, sometimes the scriptures may not align exactly with the title. And but if you stick with the program, you'll discover that these lessons are designed to eventually cover the entire Bible over a period of time. And so we pick out of these scriptures what we can. I try to share with you what I think would be pertinent and a blessing to you. And so we're looking at Genesis chapter 13 again on today. Now, whenever you study the book of Genesis, you can look at these passages through one or a number of lenses. Um, one of the writers of Genesis writes a particular way, but then you have a second writer who writes another way, and then you have a third writer who's not only a writer, but he's also the editor of the book of Genesis. And the editor, he tries to mesh, in addition to what he has to say, in addition to what writer one has to say and what writer two has to say, he comes back in and tries to mesh it all together. Sometimes rather smoothly, other times rather awkwardly, if you will. And so you got one writer, Genesis. This writer talks about animals talking and snakes walking. And so obviously he's writing to one particular type of audience. You have a second writer who talks about God creating humanity, and I quote, both male and female, he created. But then the other writer talks about God creating man and eventually putting him to sleep, taking a rib out of his inside, and then making woman later on. And so again, that first writer is obviously writing toward one audience. Second writer is writing toward another audience. And then the editor comes in and tries to mesh those two stories together. Some might say the editor does a good job. I believe probably 90% of people don't even recognize the two different creation accounts given in Genesis. It's because the editor has meshed them together. But obviously, two different writers, and then a third writer, editor. One, God makes man, and then later on comes woman to be a helpmate. Second writer says God creates humanity, both male and female created he them. Then the editor puts it together. That's quite a bit of the earlier chapters in Genesis. Here today we're looking at chapter 13 with Abram, who would go on to later become known as Abraham. In the previous chapters to chapter 13, Abram is given some instructions by God, and some people would call them tests. If that's the case, you would have to say he failed a whole lot of them. He failed a whole lot of them. You remember an occasion when Abram's wife, Sarah, was very pretty, and even after they gotten up in age, they were encountered by some men, and Abram knew that when they saw Sarah, they might take him out to get Sarah if Sarah was known to be his wife. So he told the fellas, by the way, that's my sister. And they said, okay. And so they take Sarah and even give Abram some compensation. So he literally gives his wife out, rents her out, if you will. They take her back. Their ruler, he makes her a part of his harem, and then he's experiencing trouble since she's been there, and he eventually realizes that this is Abram's wife and sends her away quickly. This is noted on a couple of occasions in scripture where Abram does this type of thing. You remember another occasion where, and this leads into our study, where the Lord tells him to leave the land of your fathers. I'm going to give you another land. He said, leave everything and everyone. And what does Abram do? He does the opposite. He leaves, but he leaves with everything and everybody. including his old nephew, Lot, whose father had passed away back around Genesis chapter 11 or so. And so he does all that. And so despite all of that, Abram, who later would become known as Abraham, is known as the father of the faithful. And that's really good news for you and I, because it shows us that God does not use perfect people. And I'm glad about that, because there's not but one who is perfect, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ himself. And so God uses people, even if they have faith the size of mustard seed, to do some great and awesome things. One theologian put it this way: the fact that God would use Abram is good news, because it means that God uses people with clay feet. Meaning, again, he doesn't use perfect people to do what he would have done in his world. But people like you and I can be put to use when we avail ourselves to him. And so let's go to chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. We'll be looking at the King James Version as well as the Living Bible translation on today. And Abram went up out of Egypt, as Africa, the Africans, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel. Some people pronounce that Bethel. But he goes to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai. Verse 4, unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at first. This is all how this passage deals with the series titled Worship, and how we worship and all of that. Wherever Abraham would go, one thing you could say about him, when he recognized the Lord was with him, he would build an altar. You and I would do well to do that as well, an altar. And so verse 4 again, unto the place of the altar, which he had make there at the first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. The Living Bible puts it this way: so they left Egypt and traveled north into the Negev, Abram with his wife and Lot, and all that they owned. For Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. Then they continued northward toward Bethel, where he had camped before, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had built the altar, and there he again worshipped the Lord. Well, listen, not only was Abraham very wealthy, but Abram very wealthy, but Lot, his nephew, had much as well. Not as much as Abram, but he was well-to-do himself. But this study is going to show you how Abram had riches, but Lot's riches had him. You'll see that as we look on verse 5. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse 6, and the land was not able to bear them. And so this new place that they go, they have so much between the two of them. The land cannot support them, right? And then their own workmen, their herdsmen, began arguing with each other, arguing over the land. And Abram would tell Lot, listen, man, this is too contentious. There's enough around for everybody. We just need to make some points of demarcation where we won't be stepping over one another. They're enemies in the land. They're looking at us, and if they see us arguing among ourselves, that will encourage them to attack us. So let's get this thing together. And so verse 6, again, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Verse 7, and there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. Again, these are the enemies of them. They watching them, looking for a weak spot. Verse 8, and Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. And so notice Abram, of course, he's much older than his nephew Lot. And although Abram owns riches, his riches do not own him. Lot does not own as much, but what he does own really ends up owning him. And he bases his decisions upon that fact. Listen to what Abram goes on to say. Verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And so Abram gives Lot graciously, he does not have to do this. He's the oldest, he owns the most. He's the uncle, Lot's the nephew. So he could have said, I'm going to take this land, you take your cattle and livestock and possessions and people, and you take this other land. But Abram is gracious, and he gives Lot the opportunity to choose the land. Lot looks at the land, verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, again in Africa, as thou comest unto Zoar. Living Bible Translation puts it this way. Then Abram talked it over with Lot. This fighting between our men has got to stop, he said. We can't afford to let a rift develop between our clans. Close relatives, such as we are, must present a united front. I'll tell you what we'll do. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the part over there to the east, then I'll stay here in the western section. Or if you want the west, then I'll go over there to the east. So again, Abram is trying to do this in a nice way. And of course, Lot takes advantage of the situation. Again, it's because Lot allowed his possessions to possess him. Great difference between the riches of Abram and the riches of Lot, but their attitude toward what they had made the difference in their decisions and their predispositions. Abram says, listen, just look it over and tell me what you would like. Again, Abram does not yield to Lot out of weakness, but out of love and trust in God. And when you love the Lord and come into plenty, it does not make you more stingy. It makes you even more giving. I've heard the expression that money changes a person. I don't find that to be true. I believe money just reveals a person what they really were. If they were giving prior to having it, you would think they would be even more giving to after receiving it. We're blessed to be a blessing to others. And so Lot looks over the land, and he takes by far what he considers to be the best part. But Abram knew whatever Lot chose, God would make sure Abram prospered in whatever area he was. And that is certainly what the Lord did. You recall back in Egypt, Abram took matters into his own hands. He did not trust God fully. He looked out for himself. He made some decisions based on him not trusting God completely. And so he's wiser now, and he's willing to let God look out for his interests. And so right or left, it didn't matter to Abram because he knew the Lord would be there. He understood more fully now God's covenant. You'll be my people. I'll be your God relationship and presence. And so because he trusted in God, Abram was not obsessed with his own rights and will to what he could have kept from Lot. Abram recognized that every gift we have, it's a gift from the Lord. It's a blessing from God. And so notice that Lot makes his choice based on what he purely could see with his eyes. Abram makes his choices and decisions based on what he cannot see. And that's what faith is. It's the substance of things hoped for, but evidence of things not seen. And so, as we move on further here, we see the Lord making another declaration to Abram. Verse 10, Lot lifted up his eyes, beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lord will have that place destroyed because of its sinfulness. The Bible says the men there in Sodom were just so wicked. And it says this land that Lot looks at, it's part of that area, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Sodom and Gomorrah is a part of that area. He says it's beautiful, but the people are wicked. It says, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, again, Africa, as thou comest unto Zoar. Verse 11, then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Now, you remember, again, when Lot eventually gets there, settles down, he falls into the culture of the wicked people around him, and he becomes a prey to them. Again, the Bible says the people in Sodom, the men were so wicked. Matter of fact, the men practice sodomy on one another. We get the name sodomy from Sodom. And Lot has daughters, and they tell Lot, when they come to his house, he said, take my daughters. They said, man, we don't want your daughters. We want your men. And it was that type of wickedness and foolishness there. And eventually, because Lot was there, God eventually destroys the place because of the people's wickedness. But because Lot was there and his daughters were still there, they felt they did not have any men to carry on their lineage. And so they end up getting their own father, Lot, intoxicated, and they go in and sleep with him. and bear children in that way. And so you can see how the decision making of Lot ends up costing him. It's not good to be greedy. And the Bible says in verse 12, after they separated themselves one from the other, Lot goes to this place he thinks it's going to be, all this and that. Abram dwelled, verse 12, in the land of Canaan, which God had already told him would be the land flowing with milk and honey. And Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom, verse 13, were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. The Bible talks about how the people there was so wicked. It left a terrible stench in the nostrils of God. And then verse 14, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him. Notice the Lord comes back to him when he's separated from Lot. Sometimes you have to separate yourself from some people and some situations. And when that happens, the Lord comes back unto Abraham and says, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward and southward and eastward and westward. Sometimes people have to get away from you, and you have to get away from some people to see some things better. The Bible says in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. Some people can block you from hearing and seeing some things. Verse 15, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. Now, I know someone missed your shout right there, because I didn't tell you prior to this that Abram and Sarah were childless, and they're up at age now. And so listen again, now that you know that, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. Lord have mercy. Here's a man with no children, and the Lord is telling him, as far as you can see, I'm going to give it to you and your seed. And Abraham's got to be wondering, well, I don't have that seed, but I'm here to tell you, if God said it, he will bring it to pass. And not only that, but I'm going to bless your seed in such a great way, you won't be able to number the seeds. He says in verse 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Lord said, I will bless you, man, your inheritance. Although you're childless now, but God speaks to him about his present and future, and says, you're blessed, you're going to be blessed, your seed's going to be blessed, and their seed's going to be blessed continually and immeasurably, unless you can count the dust of the earth. If you can do that, now you got a seed, but you can't do that. That's how much the Lord's going to bless. And then the text says, verse 17, arise, walk. And notice it does not say walk to the land, but it says walk through the land, in the length of it and in the breadth of it. Walk it all over, for I will give it unto thee. Notice after Lot got away from him, he's able to hear from God. He's able to see some things God has for him. And then he's able to walk through some things God has for him. I love it. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. I want to say something lastly about that, and then we'll be done. The Bible again says he drove by the trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron. That name, Mamre, literally means vision. And then Hebron literally means communion. And so Abram once again walked in the Lord's vision for him and in communion with him. He walks in the Lord's vision, and then he walks in communion with the Lord. Yeah. It's an intriguing text when you study it. And then what does he do? He builds an altar there. He worships the Lord. He worships the Lord. You ought to have an altar built, a place, a house of worship, a prayer closet somewhere, or all of the above, somewhere where you can go. Hear from the Lord, speak with the Lord, and be guided by the Lord on a regular basis. Everywhere Abram went, he built an altar. When he saw the goodness of the Lord, he worshiped the Lord. In case you're wondering whatever happened to Lot, get this and we'll be done. But I want you to understand this. Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, right? And Lot has these children with his daughters, and Rahab. You remember Rahab. The Bible speaks of her as the harlot Rahab. She comes from this ancestral relationship, and she and Solomon, a descendant of Abram, eventually marry. And then Boaz comes from that union. And Boaz eventually marries Ruth, who came from Lot. And then Jesus is eventually born through that lineage. And so it's intriguing that God does not use perfect people, but he used people who will avail themselves to him. You might have faults, flaws. Well, you do have faults, flaws, and failures, I'm sure, as we all do. But God can still use us for some great things when we worship him and yield ourselves to him. I pray you've been blessed by that study today. Listen, next week, read it in advance. Read 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 22 to 24, verses 37 to 39, and verses 46 through 50. So that's 1 Kings chapter 8. Just go ahead and read the whole chapter if you can. 1 Kings chapter 8, we're going to talk about Solomon dedicates the temple. Solomon dedicates the temple. I pray you've been blessed by that study on today. Again, I'm Pastor Augustus T. Curry. As always, it's a joy, honor, and delight to share with you in the study of the Word. Won't you press like, share, and drop a note to us. Let us know you're tuning in, that you're being blessed by the study. Certainly any questions or comments you have, type those in. Press subscribe. There's no cost to subscribe. It just means you'll get a little notice, a ping on your phone or your tablet whenever our next recording comes up. Love to see you Sunday morning. If you can't be there in person, check us out online, our YouTube channel, and our social media pages. Cornerstone Baptist Church, Fayetteville, Georgia. We'd love to see you 9 a.m. God bless you and God keep you. Until next time, peace.